Cairn, a well-known RPG, started out as this simple little zine that is well loved by the community, and with second edition went to this massive box set. So let's get into it. Welcome to Solitary RPG. In this video, we're going to take a look at the complete second edition box set for Carin. This was a Kickstarter that I backed. It delivered a few months back. I haven't had time to really do a lot with it. However, I have been spending some time reading through the player's handbook and the warden's guide and just wanted to share my thoughts. Before we start talking about Carin, I want to talk about an opportunity that was presented to me and I took advantage of. I was contacted by Abraham over at Talking About Games. He invited me to play in a game with him, an Eldritch horror style game. It's called Eldritch Tokyo. And we did that, and it's up on his channel if you actually want to watch me playing a game and see how I take some of the philosophies and concepts that I talk about and use them in practice. It was a great gaming session. I had a lot of fun, and Abraham is an awesome game master. So I'm going to put a link in the video description to Talking About Games. Go over, check it out. It's Eldritch Tokyo. It was an Eldritch horror game, and I just had a blast playing. Thank you, Abraham, for inviting me to your channel and giving me that opportunity to actually play with people. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time. Now let's jump into Carin, the complete second edition box set. This is not going to be a detailed look at the game. This is going to just be my thoughts about everything I've read up to this point. It all showed up in this amazing box, but the packaging was even more impressive. When the product arrived in my mailbox, this is what I was presented with, and I thought this was awesome. Normally, when I get games from Kickstarters, it's just a plain brown box. When I opened up my mailbox, I immediately knew what was in the box. This was Carin. I love this packaging, the fact that they took some time to stamp or print the box with the information. And also, when you opened it up, thank you for your support. I really like these little touches that they put into the packaging of the product. I just thought it was great, and thank you very much for doing it. I don't know, there was just something about this that made it just a little bit better than a plain brown box. Once I opened up the box, removed some of the packing material, this is what I was greeted with. This awesome box that has this art that is kind of throughout the second edition of Carin. It's very cool art, and you open it up, and I already took everything out. So I'm just kind of showing the quality of this box. They have a ribbon inside, so that way when you stack all your books and everything in it, you can just pull everything out and you don't necessarily have to just dump it on your table. I really like games that give us boxes like this, and this allows me to put in all of my materials. I can even keep dice and pencils and everything inside this box. So when I want to play Carin, I can just pull this box off my shelf and I have everything to go. And this is becoming my preferred way of buying games, is everything's in the box and I don't have to pull a bunch of books off a shelf to play my game. When I opened my box, this was the contents that were inside of it. And I'll just real quickly break this down for you. You have the Warden's Guide. This is your GM's book, and it is just chock full of tables and charts and world building tools. This is an amazing GM's guide. I have not taken a deep dive into this book. However, I want to share with you that if you go on to Thru RPG, you can actually download the Warden's Guide and the Player's Handbook for free. The publishers are allowing PDF copies to be downloaded for free, and this is one of those tool books that is just chock full of great information you can use in any RPG, But if you're playing Cairn, you can especially use it for that. And having a PDF copy is always good because you can print off certain tables and charts that you may use on a more regular basis in your gaming or add to other games that you are playing. You also have your Warden screen. This is your hard cardstock screen with that art going across it. And on the back side, you have tables and charts that would be used on a regular basis for a GM. Now, some of these tables and charts, I kind of wish they would have went in a little bit of a different direction, especially with the marketplace. One of the things in this box set that sets it apart from other box sets that I have received is you got 3 player's guides. And this was something that was unexpected to me. I was just expecting 1 player's guide, and when I opened up my box, I found 3 of them. I ended up going online trying to figure out, like, was this a mistake? Something like that. And it turns out, no, this was intentional. Everybody received in the box set 3 player's guides, which I think just takes things above and beyond what a lot of other companies do. This way you can hand these out to the players and they will have that reference material that they need. There are no monsters in the player's guide. It's basic information. It does have the core rules for the game, for combat, dungeon adventuring, overland adventures, all that, plus your character creation. And getting 3 of them was just awesome because now, as the GM, you can just give these out. However, going back to the Warden screen, here we have the marketplace on the GM screen, and because we have the extra players handbooks, I think this space could have been better used maybe for encounters, like creatures, maybe a rundown of just their basic stats and information, so that way we didn't have to refer back to the Warden's guide. Just more useful information that's not in the player's guides, just to help the GM run their games better. It's still a good Warden screen, still useful, and it does have this really cool art. So if anything, you can just have it out on your table to help keep the immersion in the game going forward. And I've already spoken about the player's guide. Getting 3 of them was just phenomenal. You also get Twin Lakes, which is a adventure that you can run people through. It's a cool little zine style adventure. You get the adventure anthology. This is number 1. It just has a bunch of little short adventures in it. And you also get a pad of character sheets. And these are just awesome. They have everything you need to play your game. They are a smaller size, so it might be a little hard for some of us to write in the spaces provided. But because you can get all these in PDF form, you can print them out larger if that is the case for you. And I believe there's also another one that is done in landscape that's designed differently if you want some different looks. But I do like the thematic theme of the character sheets for this game. What I'm going to focus on in this video is the player's guide. This covers a lot of the rule mechanics and also has character creation. Character creation in this game is a lot of fun, and you can go about it in a couple different directions where you can pick your characters' background and their omens and their stories and their bonds and all that, or you can just roll randomly. I like to roll randomly, so that's what we're going to do. You're going to open it up to, who helped create the game, artists, all that. And you're also going to get your table of contents. I like how it was printed on the back of the cover here with this information. Just making use of the full book, which is always cool. You'll get an overview of the game and principles for the players. This is good stuff, especially if someone's not familiar with playing an RPG game. They get all of these terms that get thrown around a lot, and they get a breakdown of what those terms mean, especially for the principles for players, so that they kind of have an understanding of what their role is in the game itself. The one thing I kind of wish they would have put in here is immersion. Talking a little bit about immersion. It's another one of those terms that gets thrown around a lot in RPG games. It would have been kind of cool to also include that either in the overview or in the principles for players, just so people understand that RPG is about the immersion into the world, really trying to bring that game to life in your imagination, using certain concepts, maybe focusing on the senses that humans have, like taste and smell and sight and hearing, or just being descriptive in what you're doing and not just saying, I'm going to slash the creature or I'm going to attack. Talking about how you're going to attack and really bringing that game to life in the imagination of everybody that is playing at the table. But you do get these concepts and it's very helpful. The first thing the player's guide is going to go into is character creation. And you're going to start by choosing your background or rolling for your background. There's a D20 chart here that you can roll on. I rolled a 19, so I got a real runner. And then I can just go right over here to my character sheet and I can just write that information down. Once you've chosen your career, it will tell you what page to go to. On that page, you'll get an image of what a real runner is. You'll get their inventory, starting equipment, and you'll also have a list of names to choose from. So if we go to 56, we got the real runner, talks a little bit about what their job is in the world, their starting gear, and here's their names. One of the things I notice is most of the names have 10 names to choose from. If you want to randomize it, you can just roll a d10. I got 3, so I got Brooke for the name, so I can just write that name right here on my character sheet and I'm good to go. Since I'm here, I might as well add my inventory. Now that I've listed all my inventory on from my background, I got my name, I can go back to creating my character. Now it talks about rolling your attribute, hit protection, and traits, and those are going to be all the following charts that you have to roll on, and then you'll get into the marketplace, and that will be it. So what we're going to do is roll our attributes. This game only has 3 attributes: strength, dexterity, and willpower. You roll 3d6 down the line, so we'll just do that right here. And that one went off the table. That's 12. And you're allowed to switch 2 of them. So 7 for dex, and then willpower, 9, 10, 11, 12. Now, one of the things that's unique about Cairn is the way combat works and how you take damage. When you're in combat, you're going to have hit protection. It's a very low number, and it doesn't mean your character's dead. What it triggers are certain events that can take place, because you can regenerate your HP quickly in this game. That's why it's a low value. What you'll end up doing, though, is once you go into the negative values, and we'll talk more about it, you start taking damage to your strength. So you want your strength to be a relatively high number. You can also have this happen to your dexterity and your willpower. Depending on the character you're creating, you might want to swap like I'm going to do. So I'm going to swap my dex and will because I want my dex to be 12. And I want my willpower to be 7, just to make my character a little bit better in the game. This is a roll low system, so you want to roll underneath those numbers. To me, dexterity is important, so that's why I'm making that swap. So we have our attributes, and that is all done, and we did our swap. Now we're going to roll our hit protection. That's going to be 1d6. This is what we get. Let's hope for something good. I got 3. 3 is not a lot of hit protection, but like I said, hit protection is not your character's life. Actually, your attributes are your life. If your strength goes to 0, then your character's dead. So you actually do have some ways of staying alive. For inventory, you have 10 inventory slots. Another one of the mechanics in Cairn that sets it apart is as you take fatigue in the game. So if you're on an overland adventure and you're not stopping to rest, or you're not finding food, or you're out of rations, you can start taking fatigue. And as you take fatigue, they fill up inventory slots. That's why you have these boxes here. You can just check them off. If you accumulate too much fatigue and it starts going into where your weapons are at in your inventory, you have to drop those weapons or hand them off to somebody else. It's a very good immersion tool for the game to represent maybe your characters are pushing themselves too hard and they're starting to get exhausted, or based on your game that you're playing, there are ways for the warden to give you fatigue. You start losing inventory, and it's a balance of like a resource that you're trying to balance to ensure that you're resting, or it is a tool you can use to push yourself further so that you can, yeah, take some fatigue, but get where you need to go and then rest up and remove that fatigue from your characters. Everybody starts with a backpack, so characters can carry 4 items comfortably without the help of a bag. So I could carry four of these items without having to use a backpack, but I do have a backpack that carries up to 6 items. And it's just doesn't take up an inventory slot. It's just slung around your back or however your backpack is done. But you do have a backpack holding 6 items, and the rules go into more detail about using horses and carts and all of those types of things, or having hirelings to carry your equipment so that you're not bogged down with that extra inventory, so that you can push that fatigue mechanic further. It also talks about if you fill up all 10 of your slots, your HP goes to 0 because you are pushing your limit of what you can carry, and you'll have no HP. You always start at 0. So if you get into combat with all of your equipment on you, that could be a problem. So something to think about. And it also gets into what an inventory slot is. I have armor here, and the description for the armor for the character I'm using says it's bulky. So that to me is taking up 2 slots. And there are descriptive words like that in the rule book to help you determine if something is going to take up 2 slots or not. Then we get into character traits. This is all straightforward stuff. We're, as solo players or RPG players, we're used to these word tables that you can just roll up on. And there's a spot here for your different traits that you can just write down these descriptive words, or you can just use the back of the character sheet. It's blank to write down these descriptive words. So we're just going to go in order and kind of get a general sense of what our character looks like. Okay, so I rolled on all the charts. These are the descriptive words I have to describe my character. My physique, I'm short. My skin is oily. My hair is long. My face is sunken. My speech is precise. My clothing is filthy. My virtue is honorable. And my vice is I'm aggressive. So I can use these words to help play my character in the game and give some descriptive information. Bonds are just some information you can use to help create story arcs in your game, or just situations in your game. You just roll a d20, you get your bond 15. So you crossed a creature of the wood, and it cursed you with a stone heart. With each passing month, the stone grows heavier by 1 slot. Until your debt is lifted, you cannot truly die. So that gives me some information I get to put into the game, and also creates a mechanic that I need to follow up on. So it's saying each month the stone grows heavier and takes up a slot, and the slot is an inventory slot. So I am going to lose inventory slots, and now I have a quest to get this debt lifted. That's something the warden gets to create, or together with the player create, how do we lift this debt? and I do not truly die. So all of this is game mechanic stuff based on this bond that I can use in my game. I'm just going to write this bond down here. And this already creates that adventure for Brooke to go out and try to get rid of this bond as quickly as possible. And this happens every month, so tracking time is going to be important for this particular character. And that's something that will just happen during gameplay, but it's something also to keep in the back of my mind. Omens, these are also really cool. There are instructions here on who gets to roll for an omen. When you talk about creating your age, you roll 2d20 plus 10. If you're the youngest character, you're going to roll for an omen and read it out loud to everybody at the table. Again, kind of like a bond, giving more information to help create those adventure seeds and those ideas of what you're going to be playing. If you're playing one character, you automatically get an omen. So let me roll my age real fast, and then we will get into rolling my omen since I'm only creating one character. So I am 41 years old. That is my age. There's no place on the character sheet for your age, so I'm just going to put it next to my name. And this all kind of fits in with the sunken face and the long hair. Kind of fits the narrative a little bit there. And now we'll roll for our omen. I rolled 13. Swarms of insects are fleeing from the wood in droves, destroying any wooden structure they cannot cross. The sound of their wings hum a familiar tune as they pass overhead, like a forgotten nursery rhyme. Very cool. So now we got more adventure information that the warden can put into the game. And for Brooke, whenever these swarms of insects, like we'll just say locusts, are flying overhead, the sound that may be disturbing to others and a sense of fear to others, for Brooke, it's just going to be kind of hearing a nursery rhyme. So that's really cool. So that there's going to be no fear from Brooke when those swarms are coming overhead. And then we have the marketplace. Here you just have things that you can buy. Since we have 9 gold, we can go shopping. At this point, with the inventory that I was given, having 3 open slots, I'm just going to let this go. I'm just going to hold on to my gold for gameplay. So that was character creation. It's really straightforward. There's not a lot that you have to do. I just made notes about my bonds and my omens. Later on, I will write them down in the spaces provided. For me, this is really small boxes and lines for me to write on. I'll probably print one of these out as an 8.5 by 11 so that I have more room to write and take notes about my character as I'm playing. Now we got the basic concepts of our characters done. We're going to go back to our career for the real runner. Every one of the careers have charts that you roll on to give you additional benefits in the game. These are D6 charts that you roll on. I rolled a 4 for what song are you best known for. So right now I'm just going to make a note about song 4 and what exactly is it. The Reed Fisher, a celebrated song about massive carp that always seem to get away. Begin with a spool of river twine, 5 uses. Each dip into the river guarantees a catch, though it might not be pleasant. So now I've just got more inventory to add to my character, which is river twine. And this is going to help me find food in the game when we are playing, but it does take up an inventory slot because it doesn't say that it's a petty item. So you have to accept it that it's an inventory slot. And what pays your way across the land? You can also pick these. You do not need to roll any of these. I got 6. So I got guide, and I'm just going to write this down. And for guide, you shepherd caravans and travelers across water-soaked lands. Start with a map relevant to your next journey. Now, it also here doesn't say if the map is petty or not. We can use common sense. It's a folded up piece of paper. So I'm going to write that down as a petty item. I'm not going to do that for the river twine because it's got 5 uses. So to me, that would be a little bit of a bulkier thing. And now I have a song that I'm famous for, which is the Reed Fisher, which is something I can sing when I am fishing. So that's cool. And then we get into the rules of the game. And there's not a lot of rules. This is a pretty straightforward game. You're going to be making saves against one of your attributes. Strength is primarily going to be the one you use a lot of in the game. It can also be dexterity or willpower depending on what situation is unfolding, and you get a little descriptive information. To make a save roll in this game, you need to roll equal to or under the attribute you are checking. So if I'm making a strength check, I'm going to roll. I rolled an 11. That's under my strength, so I succeeded in that save. If two opponents are trying to overcome each other, so if you have, maybe I'm trying to overcome an NPC or another player, maybe we're having a arm wrestling game, the person that's going to roll is who's most likely at risk of failing, and that's going to be the person with the lowest attribute. And that's how you would do an opposed roll. And if you have two characters taking an action together, again, whoever has the lowest attribute is going to be the one that makes the roll. If you have a higher attribute, you're not going to make that roll because it's got to be the risk, and that's what this game is about, taking risks. What you're doing is going to have an effect, and that's who's going to make those rolls. For healing and recovery, resting for a few moments, drinking water restores lost HP. And when I was talking about low values in the HP, this is why it's not a high valued number. It happens real quick for recovering those HPs. But when you start taking fatigue and you start taking damage to your attributes, that requires a longer rest. That is how you really recover, because your fatigue and your attributes are what keep your character alive. Since we're talking about HP, we should also talk about combat a little bit, just a little bit. If your HP goes to exactly 0, Cairn has a very cool mechanic in place that gives you scars. Something happens. So let's say we're in a fight. I have armor of 1, so I take 4 points of damage. Armor absorbs 1 point of damage. The other 3 go to my HP first. That takes me exactly to 0, so I've lost 3 HP. Flip over to page 66. I took 3 HP of damage. Walloped. You're sent flying and land flat on your face, winded. You are deprived until you rest for a few hours. Then roll a d6. Add that amount to your max HP. That's just really cool. The scars are a unique mechanic in this game, and they are linked to your HP, but you have to get the character or the opposing, the NPC or whatever, down to exactly 0. So there's kind of a little bit of a gamey mechanic to that if you're really trying to help your characters out, because Walloped actually benefits me. So that's one way I can actually grow my HP value. So what happens when you're deprived is your PC cannot recover HP, attributes, or item slots from fatigue. And if you're deprived for more than a day, you start adding fatigue to your inventory. So being deprived can happen a couple different ways. As you saw with the scar, I already got deprived, and now my character needs to rest for a few days before I can recover my HP or my attributes or anything else. So it is kind of important. You can also get deprived from spells and other mechanics within the game. So being deprived is just a little bit harsher than being fatigued, Being fatigued, you can cause your characters to become fatigued by pushing yourself and not resting or being out of rations, things of that nature. But each time you take fatigue, they take up these inventory slots. And if they start going into the things that you're carrying, you have to drop them. So you may want to really consider how you have your items listed, because you're just going to go up the row here. That's how I'm going to play it. So I may want to have something that I'm not as excited about in my lower inventory slots, and things that I really need to keep in the upper end of my inventory slots. But it is a cool mechanic in the game. Armor, pretty straightforward. It just reduces damage by the point value. So Brooke actually has armor 1. So anytime I take damage, I reduce 1. Your PCs and NPCs, monsters, they cannot have more than armor 3. So this isn't one of those games where you're going to have this outstanding full plate armor and it's going to block all kinds of damage. The max you can have is 3. So just keep that in mind. Reactions. This is how NPCs or encounters are going to respond. It's a simple D12 roll, and you just have a word on how they're going to respond. But morale, encounters have morale, characters do not have morale. And the first time an encounter takes damage, they have to make a will save. Once they make their will save, if they pass, they continue to fight. If they fail, they run away. The next time they take a will save is when their numbers are cut in half. It's a little bit like 4 Against Darkness in that sense of when you reduce the encounters by half, they take a save. Same concept here. Talks about fighting in groups and things like that. But morale is only something that affects your NPCs and your encounters. Characters do not have a morale value. Here we talk about hirelings. There is a misprint. It talks about the marketplace being on page 17 and 18. It's actually on page 16. Not that big of a deal. But you have hirelings on page 16. You can roll up these hirelings or pick them specifically for why you're hiring them to help you with your adventure. And then the Die of Fate. So this is a little bit like an oracle, not a yes/no answer, but kind of giving a positive or negative outcome. You're just simply going to roll a d6. If you get 4 or more, it's favorable for the PCs. If you're 3 or under, it's bad luck for the PCs. So if you're in one of those situations in your game, you don't know how the outcome is going to be for the characters, you can just roll a Die of Fate, and that will help you, guide you in that decision-making process. Now we'll get a little bit deeper into combat. This is going to talk about the rounds of combat. You can take 2 actions. You can move or you can attack. Those are your basic actions. But the first round of combat is important because this determines who gets to go in that first round of combat. The PCs have to make a dexterity check. That's another reason why I wanted my dexterity to be high. And you roll your d12. I rolled a 17. I failed. So the encounter that I'm fighting gets to go first in the first round of combat. They do not roll to hit. They just automatically hit. This is something I am becoming more and more acceptable to in my gaming. I really enjoy getting away from the roll, hit, miss, armor, value type concepts. They just hit. They roll damage. I take my armor. I take the result. If it drops my HP down, I do the scar thing if it's a 0. If it goes below 0, then I have to start taking damage to strength in combat. As soon as I take damage to my strength value in combat, I have to make another roll. I rolled a 6, I would survive, so that I can keep going on. If I fail that roll, things start happening. It's a pretty brutal system, and that is what's talked about in the beginning here, talking about combat. It's not necessarily something you want to run out there and be a murder hobo and killing things. You need to be very cautious about your combat and make sure you're putting your PCs in a position to where there's a better chance of success. And then after that, it just goes back and forth until the combat is over. Talks a little bit about actions, describe what you're going to do, and then let the GM respond to your actions. When you attack, you just roll your damage die, subtract the target's armor value. The remaining damage goes to the opponent's HP. You automatically hit. If you have multiple attackers targeting the same foe, you're going to roll, and whoever rolls the highest is going to be the one that does the damage. You don't all get to hit and do damage. So it's just, if you have a group attack, like me and a hireling are attacking, we would both roll our damage dice. Let's say we both are doing D6. The 5 would be the one that goes through, the 1 would be ignored. Then we have attack modifiers. You have impaired, enhanced, and blast. Impaired is the encounter has advantage over you. They're either fighting from behind a wall or something else that is like higher ground, something like that. Something narrative is giving them advantage over you. And then you are going to be considered impaired in that combat. Regardless of what weapon you have, you only do D4 damage. And that is not good. So you may not want to put yourself in that position. On the flip side, if you have the advantage, your PCs have the advantage, you're considered enhanced, and then you automatically roll a D12 for your damage instead of what your normal dice value is going to be. When you're doing a blast effects, maybe there's a spell or something you found, like a bomb or something that's going to have a radius effect on the encounter that you're doing, you're going to roll separately for each affected character. You don't just do one roll for blast damage. Everybody takes the damage separately. And if you have the ability to fight with 2 weapons, so maybe you have a special skill that allows you to, or you did some training during downtime so that you can become better, you would roll both your damage dice and just pick the highest one for doing the damage. So these are your attack modifiers. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about critical damage, get a little bit more detail about this mechanic. So when you take HP damage, if it goes to 0, exactly 0, you get a scar. And scars can be good for your PCs. However, when you start going below 0, you start removing value from your strength. So let's say I take damage and I'm at -2 to my strength. So now my strength is 10. I immediately have to make a strength save. I rolled a 6, I succeeded, but if I rolled a 16, I now took critical damage. Once you take critical damage, all you can do is crawl around weakly, gasping for life. You're basically out of the combat, and if you do not get aid, someone giving you bandages or tending to your wounds, if you're in a party, you are just down, you're out. And then if you take more damage, you have to continue to roll as you reduce your value, and your character can just die. That's the gist of combat. It can go really quickly, especially if you have a low HP value. You're going to be making some of those attribute saves when you're in combat. And once you lose all of your strength values, so let's say we took critical damage, but the encounter continues to attack me and my strength goes to 0, I'm dead. This can also happen if your dex is reduced to 0, you are paralyzed. If your will is reduced to 0, you are delirious. If you have a complete loss of your dex and your will, the character is rendered unable to act until they restore it through some sort of extended rest or something like that. So that's why I like this game, because it's actually attacking your attribute values, and once those reach 0, things start happening to you. So it's really cool. That's how critical damage works in combat. It also talks here a little bit about if the PCs take damage outside of combat, they should instead receive damage to an attribute. Typically strength is what they're recommending. Depending on what's going on though, things can happen. Then it's going to talk about character death, and basically once a character dies, they're removed from the game, but to keep the game moving forward, the person playing that dead character can take the role of one of the hirelings, or create a new character real quickly. So this is why I would recommend at session 0 maybe creating a couple other characters and having a few hirelings around, because combat's going to be brutal and it's going to be quick, and you're rolling a d20 on your saves when you take that critical damage, so there's a good possibility that things are going to go sideways quick. Here it's talking about detachments, so if you're fighting in large combats, you got some rules, and it also talks about retreating or running away from a combat. So if you find yourself in a situation where you want to flee from a combat, you need to make a dex save, and you also have to have a safe place to run to. So it's not just make a save on dex, I passed, okay, I'm out of the combat. No, you have to have part of that narrative in place to give you a safe place to run to. And if you do not have that, you cannot flee the combat. So a little bit of strategy is being used. Ranged attacks in this game, you don't roll to hit. So if you do have ranged attack, you just automatically hit. However, the range band is based on, can you see the whites of the encounter's eyes, or can you see their eyes? That's kind of a cool narrative way of describing things. If you can't see the whites of their eyes, you're at long range. And if you're at long range, you are shooting at impaired. You come back to your attack modifiers. Impaired mean you just roll a d4 for damage, and that's it, regardless of what your weapon does. So that gives you some narrative information and maybe a little bit of story arc to add in there, where your person with ranged attacks are going to want to be a little stealthier, make some dex rolls to get up closer so they can get a better hit. Also, ammunition is not tracked in this game unless you want to. I would probably just do a usage dice, starting out with a d6 or higher value depending on your game. And if you roll a 1 after shooting, it's going to drop down to a d4, and so on and so on. Usage dice are really cool, and it's just a simple roll you make after using your arrows. And it can be used as a way of narratively saying that after the combat or after shooting at range, the person shooting can go retrieve their arrows because it hit a tree or dropped short someplace. Now we're back to scars, which are something we already talked about. You get into magic. So magic in this game, all the spell books are listed in the Warden's Manual. This would have been kind of helpful if they would have just typed that out in the book, just saying the spell books are on page 134, starting at page 134 in the Warden's Guide. But every spell is a book and it takes up a slot. Just that simple. You're not going to have endless amounts of spells. They're going to be very limited to your inventory slots because they are a book and they take up that spot. You literally have to open up the book and read from the book the spell, because anyone can cast magic if they want to. And once you read the spell, you take fatigue from the spell, taking up inventory slots. So you're not going to be casting a lot of magic in this game, because you can end up fatiguing out real quick, but it's to represent that the spell is basically draining your energy, and therefore you can't carry as much and you're exhausted and you can get into fatigued and become deprived and all those things. Scrolls are another way of casting magic in this game. There's not a list of scrolls in the Warden's Manual, but they are similar to spell books. They are considered petty, so they don't take up an inventory slot. It's just a folded up piece of paper. They do not cause you fatigue, and they disappear after one use. So it's a one and done, where a spell book you can read over and over again. So they're just a little different. You may make up these scrolls, maybe taking something from a spell book and just reducing down maybe the damage it does or the effect that it has in the game, making it a scroll, or finding scrolls in the adventures and things like that. But there's not a list of scrolls in the Warden's Manual. Relics, these are in the Warden's Manual on page 142. These are items that have magical spell powers. They don't cause fatigue, and they have a limited use, kind of like the River Fishing Twine. We could say that's a relic because it has a limited use of 5, and I have a result of automatically catching fish. And then some will also have recharge conditions listed for them as well. Now we're going to get into section 4, which are procedures. This is where you're going to go over dungeon exploration and wilderness exploration. I like the fact that this was included in the player's handbook. These are the procedures for going through a dungeon. It'll give everything about the procedures that the GM is going to follow and the charts that are going to be rolled on if you have an event that takes place. Including this in the player's handbook is actually a good benefit. That way, the players have the information they need so they know basically how to proceed through the dungeon, and they don't have to rely on the GM to give them that information. Pretty straightforward information. I think the one important part here are the dungeon events. This is this table down here. Gives you some ideas of how you would trigger those events. Spending more than one dungeon cycle in a room or a location could trigger an event. Moving quickly or haphazardly through a room, move into a new area, level, or zone of the dungeon could trigger an event, or you create a loud disturbance. If you're smashing down a door, if you tipped over a statue, you could roll one of these events. Could be an encounter, a sign, environment, loss, exhaustion, or quiet. And then it gives you basic information of what these events are. And then you get into actions and searching and resting. I really like the panic rule, is that a torch can be lit 3 times. So Brooke has one torch, it says 3 uses. Doesn't mean he has 3 torches. He has one torch and it can be lit 3 times. So in the game, if something causes the torch to go out, I can relight the torch. But after the third lighting of that torch, it can no longer be relit. So you actually have to track your torch use a little bit. Not hard, it's just 3 uses. But the torch lasts until something in the environment causes it to go out. So in a dungeon, if something causes your torch to go out, the environment, a gust of wind comes along and blows it out, or you're involved in like an avalanche and the torch goes out and it's pitch dark, you now have to make a will save or you start to panic. And my wills for Brooke is 7. I rolled an 11, so I failed. Now my character is panicked, and basically my HP goes to 0, and I cannot respond in the first round of combat because I'm panicking, and I'm also impaired. So being panicked is not a good thing in this game, and you have to make a will save every time until you pass your will save and overcome the condition of being panicked. But when you're panicked, bad things are going to happen for you. And then over here is where all the rules are listed for using a torch, and you can also use lanterns. And lanterns pretty much work the same way. They can, but you have a can of oil that has 6 usage, so you can use them a little bit longer. It's the ideal way of going and exploring in my mind, because when combat happens or something happens, I can set down the light source and have the combat and then pick it back up. And for the narrative concepts of what the light source provides you, basically you can see 40 feet from the light source. So 20 feet in front of you, 20 feet behind you, and to the sides is how I use it, because the light source is in the center and it radiates around you. So that's basically what light provides you. Talks about doors here, making an attribute check using your raw abilities for doors, if they're locked, if they're stuck, if they're blocked, or if you want to force them to be stuck because you're trying to get away from somebody. You're going to use your raw ability, and it doesn't say specifically strength, which is kind of interesting because you may use dex to open a locked door because you're trying to pick a lock and you're using your dexterity. Or if it's a puzzle door, you may use your willpower to solve the puzzle, or if it's just a stuck door, you may use your strength. So it just says using your raw abilities. So depending on how the door is secured would determine which attribute you're going to use. You're just going to make a check for it. And you don't need to make any checks if you're trying to detect anything or observe anything from the door, like if you're listening to the door or something like that, or smelling from what's on the other side of the door. That's just something that happens narratively. Then you go into traps here. If you are searching for traps, you have a 2 in 6 chance that you're going to find the trap. But if you're just going haphazardly and just running in there, you may just spring that trap and that's it. Damage from traps usually going to be taken from strength or dexterity, not from HP. So traps are not combat, so they don't take HP damage. They're going to go right into your attribute damage, which means you're going to want to search for traps. And then we get into wilderness exploration. Pretty straightforward mechanic for wilderness exploration. If you're looking at a 24-hour day, you have 3 8-hour blocks, morning, afternoon, and night. You do your typical things where you're going to rest at night and take actions for maybe getting food or doing other things. So you have some travel, you then have to do some resting. You can force yourself to not rest, but that's when you start taking the fatigue. And then you have some charts here to explore the conditions and some of the penalties that may add time to the travel. This system relies on a point system of we're going from this point to this point. It's going to be one watch. So we can travel to this location in an 8-hour day. So if we don't have rations or anything with us, we can just make this travel. It's not a problem. Then you got this path here. It's going to take 2 watches. Still can get it within a day. But if we're going to go around the mountains over here, it's going to be 4 watches. We're going to need to make sure we bring rations with us and we have supplies so that we can rest before making it to the location. Things can happen to add to these values. So these could be pathways and roadways which have no penalties or anything. But if we're using trails, we're going to add an additional watch. And there's a 2 in 6 chance of getting lost. So if we roll a d6, I rolled a 5, we didn't get lost. If we're going through the wilderness, so we're going to take like a shortcut through the wilderness, it's going to add 2 watches, and now we have a 3 in 6 chance of getting lost. So these are some of the penalties that you take with your watches and things that are going to take place. And it just gives you some definitions of what the terrain difficulty is and things like that. We have weather charts and the weather difficulties, things that can happen while we're traveling over land. Then it's going to talk about traveling at night. You can travel at night, but your chances of an encounter increase and it's harder to see because you're doing either torchlight or a lantern. You could narratively in your story say it's a full moon so you can see better and you may not need a torch, but that would be up to your warden to make those decisions. We have sleep rolls here. This is when you sleep, you recover fatigue, things like that. Talking about light sources again and being able to see, and your lantern rolls. Pretty much the same stuff that you would see in the dungeon adventure, but you are going to take actions, restocking your supplies, keeping watch, all of those types of things. And it's all covered in these rules. Pretty straightforward stuff. Then we get into downtime. This is something for your characters to do in between adventures. Downtime are things that your characters are trying to get better at. This is your way of improving maybe your damage value of your weapon because you're going to get trained by someone to use it better, or you're going to have a milestone that you're trying to reach, and this is something that might take you on a journey. These are great for creating background information for your characters to go out and try to achieve to improve their characters. It's with this downtime. There's a variety of different things you can do. Milestones are bigger goals that you're trying to accomplish, and they may take time and send you into different areas to meet with different people. So if you're maybe a magic user and you're trying to find certain spells or learn certain spells, those might be milestones where you have to go to certain locations looking for the book that you're after. There are different opportunities with milestones where you can pay for certain things, or you may have to find certain things or build a reputation for yourself. Maybe you're trying to get favor with a leader in a kingdom or something like that. There's also loss, offering something specific and unique, a finger, a soul, a relic, etc. So maybe you have to make a sacrifice, or you have to go out and do certain things to accomplish your milestone for your character. This is more in depth. Others are pretty straightforward. You're going to do some research, and your research is going to help you accomplish a task in your character's background. You can do training. This is where you can improve your character's abilities for sword fighting or the weapon they're using or something of that nature. Again, giving you all of the information you'll need. Strengthening ties, where you're building your reputation and you're making relationships with other people outside your party. And that's pretty much it. Then we get into the background of the Vald. This is the world for Carin. In the player's book, they give real brief information, but if you go to the Warden's Manual on page 178, it gets into more detailed information for the world of Carin. The reason I'm only focusing on the player's guide in this video is this covers the rules. This gives you a general idea of how the game is played, how easy character creation is, and still giving you a lot of background information to really create this character with the traits and the omens and the charts you roll on and your bonds that you have, and covers the rules themselves. And the fact that we got 3 of these in the box set is just awesome. The Warden's Guide, this expands the world of the Vald, giving you detailed information and how to set up adventures. This is a book that is just packed full of information, and if I do a video for this, it's going to be a separate video because this has gone on pretty long, but there's just a lot of information. Go to Thru RPG, pick this up. It's a free PDF to download. I'll put a link in the video for you, so make your life a lot easier if that's what you need, but go check it out. Download it. You have all your monsters in here, all kinds of charts and tables, and it's really all about setting up the adventure and using the tools in here to help you create all that information. That was my look at Cairn 2nd edition. I've played Cairn before. I like the system, the way that everything works with the HPs being low, and then you start taking damage to your attributes, and the fatigue system just sets it apart and adds a lot more narrative for the solo player like me to pull from to describe what's going on in my scenes and why my character's acting the way they're doing. Because if they're taking a bunch of fatigue because they're pushing themselves to get someplace, I can add that into my narrative. Thank you for watching, and have a great day.